with cider in Japan because Japan is predominantly an apple country.
Hello, my name is Rio Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
We heard from Lee Reeve of Insider Japan, bringing us into this here episode 406 of Cider Chat. He was talking about how Japan is an apple country. We'll be hearing more about that topic and also the Japanese Cider Cup and the state of cider in the country. But first, we have a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. Welcome, welcome, welcome if you are new to this here podcast. It is a resource for cider makers, cider maker wannabes, like folks who just like drinking cider and say, I'd like to find out, how is this made? Or perhaps you have an apple tree, a pear tree, a quince, or a medlar, a sorbus domestica, or now you're scratching your head saying, what the heck is she talking about? This is a resource for you. Cider Chat has a lot of info. There's over 400 episodes. I've been rolling out this podcast weekly for 9 years. So we got you covered. If you need some info on this topic, you're pretty much guaranteed to find something at the website. And do not shy away from using that little search button. It's like put in a little query, put a particular maker brand you're looking for. Or, hey, let's say you're looking for a cider tour. We have one of those. I'll be talking about that shortly coming up. So there's a lot there to be found at ciderchat.com, which leads me to a little topic of something that I like to talk about every week now because we are really looking at cross-promotion of cider for 2024. And each week I am making mention of anybody out there who tags Cider Chat in one of their social media posts, then we are able to cross-promote your work too. So let's kind of start back. And this is a Swedish-based cidery, and they are called Drig Cider. And I'll have a link in the show notes. Each episode gets show notes, so just go to episode 406, and you'll see Drig Cidery, which is translatable to roughly. So it's Drig Cider, which means roughly cider. So I think that's kind of interesting. And they made mention of Cider Chat in an Instagram post as one of the resources to check out. So thank you so much to the makers there in Sweden. Then we also saw that Heartland Cider Works, which is based in Oregon in the Willamette Valley. You can actually find their cider at a cool place because it's a cider bar that makes cider. They have a whole bunch of selection of ciders, including Heartland ciders. And there's also a taco restaurant right there. They're all sharing the same pace, and that's Azula's Taco House. And it's in Salem, Oregon. Again, there'll be a link in the show notes, and I really want to encourage you to stop the clock. And if you are going out to Oregon and maybe traveling from Portland, going down to Eugene or something like that, to check out La Familia Cider and have some of those tacos with cider. I dream about it. Seriously. Anyways, Alicio from Heartland made mention of Cider Chat that he had just listened to the Revel Cider episode, which was last week's episode with Tarek Ahmed. That's a Canadian-based cider. So thank you so much for that mention. And then we also saw that Wooden Gate Cider, which is based in Canada, in Manitoba, precisely, actually in the town of Pilot Mound in the province of Manitoba. It's north of North Dakota and southwest of Winnipeg, Canada. I don't know if they fully have a tasting room there, but they did a nice thing where they made mention of Cider Chat as one of the resources out there in the world to find out about cider. So thank you to all these different makers, including our friend Marcel in the Netherlands. He has a cidery called De Hennener, the horticulturist, if you will, the gardener. That's what that translates to. And we've been mentioning him every week because every week he's posting something that is linking back to Cider Chat and primarily sharing that there is this info flyer that he downloaded at ciderchat.com. He got it from the support page there. Anyone can do this. If you're a commercial maker or you're a cider enthusiast, download that little info flyer, post it somewhere, take a selfie, or just, post it on your favorite bulletin board out there, and we'll make mention of it. It's a great way to keep cider in the news, and in turn, it keeps cider going up. So, #XPromoteCider, and we will be following you and following your stories. So, thanks again to everybody. There'll be links to all these cross-promoters of cider in the show notes at ciderchat.com for this here episode 406 with Lee Reeve of Insider Japan. Up next, we're going to hear a little word from one of the sponsors of this podcast.
It is time once again for the New York International Cider Competition. This year is the 6th annual NYI Cider Competition, and it will be held the first week of April 2024. Top trade buyers, including importers, distributors, retailers, and craft beer bar owners, will be judging the ciders in a blind taste test by its category and the current price of the cider submitted. Ciders are judged by top trade buyers in the industry, as if they were buying for their own business. As a result, cider brands get insider info on how their ciders rate for retail shelves in terms of style, price point, and taste.
Your ciders do not have to be sold in New York or the United States. The New York International Cider Competition is open to all commercially produced ciders from around the world. Winners of this cider competition receive a 2-inch physical medal, a digital image of their medal, and a numerical score.
For more info and registration, go to nyicidercompetition.com and sign up today.
The New York International Cider Competition is a proud sponsor of Cider Chat. Submit your cider today. Go to nyicidercompetition.com, that's nyicidercompetition.com, and help keep cider going up.
Now, this here podcast is listener supported, and one way that folks help keep the podcast on the air is by hitting the donate button or by becoming a patron of Cider Chat at the Cider Chat Patreon page. And I just heard from a patron who came back to the Patreon page. He took a little break for a lot of different reasons, but I'm so happy to welcome back John Edwards. And he has a business called Principal Process NMR Associates. It's based in Poughkeepsie, New York, and he does analysis of cider. Yes, analysis. In fact, I had him on the podcast. I'm going to have a link in the show notes to that episode. He presented at CiderCon in, I believe it was 2018 in Baltimore, all on the chemical fingerprints of cider. A very, very interesting episode. If that is something that you want to know more about, there will be a link to that presentation John did. But let me catch you up with something that he wrote here. He said that he really enjoyed listening to the episode 380 with Elizabeth Ryan. That is Elizabeth Ryan of Hudson Valley Farmhouse Cider. And she was the organizer behind New York Apple Camp this past summer in 2023. And he says it really hit home because he lived right next to the Springside property. Now, you might not know what Springside is, but there's a lot of history there because it's related to A.J. Downing, who was a landscape architect. And when we did the New York Apple Camp, there was a tour that we went on with Elizabeth, driving around Newburgh and seeing what the Downing brothers did. I will, of course, put links in the show notes if you want to hear more about A.J. Downing. And isn't it cool that here was John Edwards listening to that episode and going, I lived right next door to some property that Downing had done the landscape design for the Vassar Mansion back in the 1850s. 50s. He actually left a little link here too. I'm going to put that also in the show notes. The mansion that he I'm calling it a mansion, but it was called Springside, and it's a lot about the early history of American landscape design when you talk about Downing Brothers. So that's cool. And here's another little connectivity. So he was listening also to the interview that we just had with Albert Johnson of Ross Cider and Perry Company. That's based in Ross-on-Wye in the UK. And he talked about it because his name's John Edwards, and the cider maker at Ross Cider is also named John Edwards. We have an episode with, well, he's best known as John the Cider Maker. And that was really cute. You know, it's just way we all kind of stay connected. So I want to say thanks again, John Edwards of Poughkeepsie, for signing up once again for the Patreon page. If you, like John, enjoyed this podcast, do consider becoming a patron of the podcast. It really helps. Really helps keep this podcast on the air. You just Google Cider Chat, and Patreon is spelled Patreon.
Walking through the orchards.
Coming up this September 2024 is a French cider tour going to Paris, Normandy, and Brittany. And yes, France has an amazing selection of products made with both apples, Perry pears, and we're going to be tasting some Sorbus Domestica with Eric Bordelais. So that's one of the stops on the French Cider Tour. We're going to be hanging out with Eric Bordelais. If you know him, well, you know him. And I'm going to bring back an audio snapshot we took on the tour. This is with Jeff Stoner and Kim Taylor of Green Bank Cidery. This is a Washington-based cidery. It's north of Seattle, and they're going to be talking about the tour. So let's roll to that next.
We've been in business for about 2 years, making our own cider. We own our own orchard, so we're orchard-based. And we really wanted to come out on this tour to see other orchard-based, harvest-based cideries in France, learn about the varieties of apples they use, learn about how they make cider, and how it differs from how we make cider in the United States. And as a result, this trip has been totally inspiring as a cider maker and a business owner and an orchardist. And I'm going to try to use some of the same techniques that they do here in France in the U.S.
And I would have to say, for as far as expectations for this trip, it really blew me away with how each day was so full of a lot of fun, a lot of learning, a lot of good cider, and it was so well planned and so nice to have things planned for you. So you didn't have to worry, you just knew it was going to be a fun time.
Thank you, Kim, for really summing it up, that being on a curated tour is so relaxing. And I do want to say that there's already that anticipation of the tour for everyone who has signed up. And the emails are going out, and they're getting a little bit of info about France as we move closer and closer to September. I know it's a number of months away. I'm cool with that. I think they are too. But you know what? The tour has already started because the anticipation is so much fun. Oh my goodness. I feel like, I'm already on the tour bus with everybody because the chatter begins, right? That's what it's all about. You can find out more. There are reservation links at ciderchat.com. Just go to the Totally Cider tab and click that link and sign up. There is limited seating on this tour, and I hope to see you in Paris.
Dancing in the street.
I don't know if you see a lot of dancing in the streets in Tokyo, but I do know there are apples in Japan and cider. And we're going to be hearing all about it next. So that makes this a very good time to grab a glass and join this chat with Lee Reeve of Insider Japan.
Well, here we are with Lee Reeve. You're going to hear his accent here, and it has that little Scottish twang. I don't know. How do you say it?
Twang is cute, yeah.
It's cute. Okay, it works. But you're based in Japan, and I know that listeners out there in Ciderville know a little bit about your piece here. But for those who don't, who are new to the podcast, let's give them a little broad stroke of who you are and what you do in the world of cider.
Okay, originally from Glasgow, Scotland, but I've been living in Japan since 2000, early 2000s. I came to Japan as an art designer, but found myself working for a infant craft beer scene. I'm primarily a home brewer by history, beer and cider, but was able to utilise those skills to help out people that were getting into making craft beer. I did that for, seems like forever, but at least until 2013-14, when I started to hear about these cider revivals in the United States and back home in the UK, and saw that as an opportunity to maybe get a foot forward with cider in Japan, because Japan is predominantly an apple country. And since that time, so 2015-16, it was 2017, I launched a magazine. That was about promoting and educating people about cider. I've since become an importer and distributor of cider, and now primarily work to help out, I consult most of the cider makers in Japan to, steer them on their cidery way.
Yeah.
I get a lot of the love what you're doing, I love all the success. We haven't got the success there yet, but it's a fantastic challenge to undertake. Yeah, I'll say that.
I don't know if everybody really realizes how much work it takes to do promotion at the level that you're doing in a culture that doesn't necessarily recognize the products yet. It's like you're needing to really come in from a whole bunch of different directions, and in the center is a little bit of chaos. And so that could be a little bit frustrating. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, like success? Like, how do you measure that?
So in the beginning, I naively thought passion would just prevail. If you've got the passion, you can just steamroll through anything. Well, the passion carried me a good forward way, and then, like in anything else, that's when reality slaps you in the face and wakes you up. And so I think for me, the journey is just a constant reassessment, realignment, moving forward, reassessment, realignment, moving forward. It really is baby steps. I cannot believe I've been doing this now for at least 7 years. Yeah. We're closing in on a decade of work. Yeah. That's outrageously unbelievable. Yeah. And we're still, Japan, as far as cider is concerned, is still in its infancy. I'm saying the same thing that I said 7 years ago. We're just getting started. There have been some very radical growth spurts, but we're still really low on the scale of everything about cider. Yeah.
Okay. So even the field here, I think you aren't alone on that, right? You know that. And I think we all know that. These words are echoed over and over again from makers and folks in the media, importers, exporters. It's a constant piece. And so anybody getting into this biz needs to know that, right?
Absolutely.
You have to have a strong constitution.
Absolutely. And you've got to be prepared to just encounter those kinds of challenges and brick walls and obstacles throughout the entire way. Every cider maker I've met from a brand, and this is not just Japanese, this is around the world, every cider maker, whether new or old, they have the same experience of the biggest one being is that people just don't know what cider is, or they've got this either outdated or just misaligned view of what cider is today. Mm-hmm. And trying to do that, in a country that kind of thinks that they already know what cider is and it's all sorted out. Yeah, it's a constant challenge.
Yeah.
And you do have to be strong, very strong.
So knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently?
Would I have done it again? Absolutely. Would I have done it differently? Probably a few things. One of the great challenges with anything in Japan is that it's a very culturally driven society. There's a Japanese way. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the worst thing you can do is run against the grain. I'm Scottish, that's all we do. It works some of the times, or it works to my advantage some of the times, but most of the times it doesn't. Instead of trying to make big changes or move the entire table across the room, maybe I should be focusing on just the chair, smaller things, smaller steps. So maybe I would have done that a little differently.
Bring listeners up to date with the state of cider, the industry in Japan post 2020?
The first movement post 2020 was the increase in international imports of cider into Japan. Around 2019, 2020, cider was able to be mentioned in some of the more popular magazines in Japan. And there was one in particular that actually said cider will be a buzzword in 2020. And because of that, a lot of people who were in the import business started looking abroad, and you just immediately saw a lot of new imports from the UK, from Europe. Scandinavian cider started appearing, some American new ciders started appearing, which was very exciting. And then 2020...
Wait a minute. And then the pandemic happened.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So because I just remember that. I saw you in 2020 in Oakland, California at CiderCon.
That's right.
And that's the last time we recorded.
That's right.
And so that was in the beginning of February or something like that. It was like the first week of February. And then a month or so later, and I remember corresponding with you. I was in France.
That's right, yeah.
Cedar Expo, and I was talking to you about how it's easy to travel right now because it hadn't really caught on in the U.S., but it was coming from the east to the west, like this wave of like caution and like what the heck is going on. And we had even talked about perhaps Cider Chat going to Japan.
That's right.
And so that little bubble of excitement that you were talking there was percolating up. And we can't help but mention then the world freaking shut down, man.
Yeah, that's right. Because I was in the...
Can't forget that.
The reason why we were going to invite you over was the fact that I was involved with this 6-country cider collaboration.
Yeah.
So we had, with Spain, America, Norway. It was just, we had 6 different cider makers that were going to come over, do some collaborations, then suddenly couldn't. Mm-hmm. And we ended up doing everything online. And it was...
That's crazy. You had James Forbes from Little Pomona.
He was in Japan, and it was March.
What was happening?
And it was strange, because I remember being on the train with him, and it was just, it was veritable ghost town. And then it just got worse, right? Yeah, and... Yeah, so the whole big idea of mine was to do this collaboration, and then they were going to fly out into Japan, and they were going to one-on-one work with these Japanese cider makers, and then we were going to have you come on over. And it just all went,
down the hill, because of take a little worldwide closure, and that changes the whole world upside down.
Yeah, and of course, Japan was no different than every other country. It just, people freaked out. Couldn't go out. Mm-hmm. Personally, for me, what happened was again, I'm an importer, but I also do retail sales and distribution, and so our online suddenly lit up. And but I was new at the game, so I didn't know it was lighting up. I just thought this is what always happens. I didn't take into account that people were ordering because there was no other access.
Couldn't get it. They couldn't go out shopping.
So our sales were pretty okay, and I was hearing other importers who had things on the way having big problems, losing a lot of money because especially the craft beer people, things got held up in customs, expiry dates were hit.
Product was no good.
Pallets and pallets of craft beer being tossed away. But we seemed to be doing okay. And then by the time that the world got back to normal or changed, then everything just went, as we say, where I'm from, just tits up. It just went, suddenly the reality hit, and people are now not needing online anything. People were rushing to go out, be a part of society again. And then, things just got weird and wonky, at least in Japan, as far as cider is concerned. And now people had other interests, and it just seemed, again, from the work that I do, is all this work just grinding to a halt. Or not even that, more just like somebody pin the balloon and it just popped and it was just all gone. And then it was almost like starting over, completely over from zero.
Wow, I didn't know that, because I think the online sales here in the U.S., it really helped get makers who weren't in that market get on board and then continue. And now there is, from what I see, I'm not a commercial maker in that way, but it's really a big part of the business. But still, retail front desk type of sales are the highest, right?
And again, Japan being this sort of culturally sensitive or culturally active country, people like to get out. People don't generally do things at home, so they make it a point to get out and do things with friends outside. And that really, I don't want to use the word hurt our business, but it definitely affected it.
Yeah. So how did you pivot? Because you now have the launch of the Japan Cider Cup.
Yeah, it was realizing that this revenue stream, it cannot be relied on as a major contributing source of revenue for the company. So what else can we do? And basically it was going back to what I originally did and do, is education. So it was just getting back out, educating people again, and then the creation of small events, because it took Japan a long time to be able to do public events. And so it was just waiting. And when they relaxed the laws to do it, we jumped on it and started these mini cider events, and they did okay.
What is a mini cider?
So
event?
It's basically like any sort of pop-up event anywhere else.
Yeah.
Find a location, usually small, and then just try to sell the heck out of cider and get people to have fun. Again, did pretty well, but I was now being pulled in many directions at once, and I'd have to do things in Tokyo and then 400 miles away in Osaka and Nagano and all of these different areas in Japan.
Because the market is broad there, right? You have the Nagano and then Aomori?
Aomori in the north, you've got Nagano in the sort of central, Tokyo just south of that, Osaka to the west, and all of these different places doing things and asking for our help. And then it was, I cannot be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
So what do you do? And the only answer was just have everybody come to me, and created a cider tasting competition / event. And it's called...
that's what the Japan Cider Cup is.
So the Japan Cider Cup is actually it's a 2-in-1 fun for all. It starts off as a tasting competition. And what makes our tasting competition different than nearly all other competitions is our judges are not singularly cider or industry professionals.
At all?
Yeah, we do have them, but the majority of our judges are the general public.
Wow.
So there are a few reasons why I chose it to do it that way. The most important reason was to get the public involved.
How bold. What a bold move, man. That's totally... We're just going to have folks who are... enthusiasts?
Not even anybody, and everybody. So we try to make it as fair as possible, but by fair, we do try to even out so we do events, we do tastings at restaurants and bars, so people that do drink, we do them with industry professionals, so we do have that level.
So it's not like a one-day event? Or?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, so let's understand, this sounds
So for those, if you don't, most tasting competitions, they have a call for entries. People enter the competition. The entries are gathered, and then on a particular day, a number of judges that are usually industry professionals that are chosen by the organizer of the event gather, and they sample, they taste all of these entries.
In one day.
And they do it in one day. And if you're an industry professional, then that works out. I've done it. It's very taxing work. But the problem with that model in Japan is twofold. The most important one is that we don't have cider professionals. You're talking about a country that this is brand new. And I had previously run other cider tasting competitions. And I was getting feedback from my cider making judges saying, I can't do this because I don't know how to judge a cider. What do I, the organizer, do in a situation like that? And I started looking around, and then I looked at some of the other competitions and realizing, wow, we've got judges in Japan that, I don't want to use the word aren't qualified, but they don't have the confidence even to judge. So that's not necessarily a very good precedent trying to move forward if you've got award-winning ciders that there's no criteria for what
Yeah.
makes them. So this was this is a problem now for me, is a problem. So I went back to these same judges and said, as a cider maker, what do you want? And nearly all of them said, we just want feedback. Like, what do people really
And
like about
what are they expecting, like the baseline thing? Do you give a script to the judges at all?
No,
A script in terms of, because if folks truly don't know much about cider in Japan, they know what apple is, of course, but it might just be that it's red, yellow, or green. So is there anything to say, tell us about the aroma? How is it qualified? How is that?
No, it's an excellent point. So again, I think I'm a sort of man with many hats when it comes to cider, but the biggest hat that I wear, the most important hat that I wear is the education hat. And so the way that I see it is when I do these judges, especially with the general public, I start by educating them what cider is.
Okay.
And then I give a sort of a crash course of when cider professionals do it. This is what they're looking at.
Okay.
And then I can start talking about aromas and the intensity of this and flavor profiles. And then I say that burden is really not on you. And so I'm making them, again, trying to make them comfortable, because in Japan, or I mean, anybody, if you're asked to do something, there's a stress about having to do it.
Sure, yeah.
So the point that I'm trying to make is the end goal is to try to get them to enjoy cider. And the only way you can do that is by making it an enjoyable experience for them. So that's always in the back of my mind when I'm doing this. But it's, let me teach you how you might appreciate it. These are things that you might look for. And then it's great, because without divulging the actual cider, I can tell them what's inside it. If I know the varieties of apples being used, I can tell them. So again, it's just this sort of teaching mode without them knowing they're being taught.
Yeah.
So by the time that they taste the cider, the reactions, suddenly it's
an awakening.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest refrain I hear is, I didn't know this was cider, or I always thought cider was this. Suddenly it's not. And then I get to say, guess what? We've got X amount more that are totally different. And I get to do everything that any cider influencer or cider advocate loves to do, and that's educate.
Yeah.
And the win for so they get to now taste these, and then they get to write their honest opinion that is cleverly disguised as a score sheet. And then all of that information I send right back to the cider maker, and now they get an honest evaluation, not about the quality of their cider. They get to hear what people like about it, or what they maybe don't like about it, and then they can now tweak the recipes and stuff. And we've only done it. It's only 2023 was our first year, last April, but the response from the people, the response from the cider makers has been light years beyond what I thought would happen.
What has surprised you by doing this?
One is the amount of, there's a word for this, but everybody wants to do it again.
Oh.
When's the next one?
Right.
Fortunately, it's exactly a year from now. And so now we're in the middle of year 2. I am getting, even today, two more entries. And yeah, we get to ramp things up. What makes 2024's Japan Cider Cup special is we are collaborating with the Northwest Cider Association. They were able to get I believe, government-sponsored grant. And in doing so, they will be sending over, I believe it's 10 different cider makers from the Pacific Northwest. Because I'm an importer, we're actually able to import their ciders. And we will be using, all of them are entered into the cup. Not only will people get to taste their ciders and judge their ciders, but they'll get to meet the cider makers, talk to them, interact with them. The first half of the Japan Cider Cup is this tasting competition, and then the award ceremony, for lack of a better word, is the actual event. And it's a one-day event. It starts at noon, ends at 6, so it's just 6-7 hours. And you'll get to taste more international and domestic ciders in Japan, in the same place. Admission is free. You pay as you go.
As you sip.
and you can buy ciders on the day.
Can you explain us just a little, some of the nuts and bolts here? Because cider festival in the U.S. is typically roped off, ticketed, and really micromanaged in many ways, so that you get a token for X amount of money, you get 5 tokens, or you could drink as much and it's a specific pour. I've been in Europe at different festivals, and there's dogs and children walking around and food being cooked out over open fires, and it's super chill.
I've worked with the craft beer events in Japan for quite some time, and I've seen the changes in the way that they do things. And it started off as you pay a lot of money, and then you walk in, and then you pay more money. And it's really, the events are really, they're more of a revenue stream for the vendors. And that makes total sense. I'm not slagging them at all. The problem is that, again, it puts a lot of pressure on the consumer to dole out a lot of money to drink something that, with craft beer, it's not such of a huge jump, because people know what beer is. They might not know what craft beer is, but they'll get around to it. But something like cider, there's just zero. Number one, why is anyone going to pay a lot of money to do something that they know nothing about?
Yeah.
I just...
you got to start from somewhere.
Flip the
Reinventing
model.
a wheel.
Yeah. So it was, you pay nothing, you come in, and so instead of forcing people to buy a pint of a drink, you don't. You can walk around with a shot glass basically, and get a 30, 50 milliliter pour, and you won't put you out of pocket. But when you find one that you do like, now you can go, you can scale up to the point where you can buy something.
Oh, very good.
We could have done flight options where you can buy, but they do that with craft beer. I just don't think we're ready for that yet.
Yeah.
And people, the feedback that we got was that people really enjoy sampling as many different things, because again, cultural differentiation. Japan they don't drink quite as much as, more to the point is that the Japanese people get drunker a lot quicker. They drink a cap full of any alcohol, they immediately turn red, and then everybody knows that they're drunk. Japanese people don't like to be embarrassed, especially in public.
I don't think anybody likes that. Nobody should be getting embarrassed in public. But I think there's some really beautiful cultural norms from Japan that I just love. There's a certain kind of graciousness and respect, and maybe a little trepidation before jumping in feet first, versus in the U.S., we'll say, "Kawabunga, let's go," and just go for it.
You talked about the graciousness, and yes, absolutely. And Japan is a fascinating country because there are these just understood rules about the way that Japanese people do things or don't do things. For example, one of the things that they don't do is they don't ask a lot of questions. Again, it's this, it's not even a fear, it's this a refusal to the possibility of being embarrassed by asking a silly question or not knowing. Now, that can be a good thing, but if you're trying to learn a new skill, for example,
there's a limitation. Yeah.
The need to guarantee success is very high. Most Japanese cider makers in the beginning would only use commercial yeast, all right? Because they can read the reductive properties. They know what it's going to do. And I got a group together and said, why not try wild yeast or just don't do anything? We can't do that, because if you do that, and instead of
the natural wine movement isn't really strong in Japan.
Oh no, just the opposite.
Okay,
but yeah,
interesting.
It took them a long time to get to that point.
No crossover.
But instead of Japanese cider makers just immediately emulating the wine, it's this weird thing, or asking Japanese cider makers for how to do that.
Yeah, how's it work?
They just won't.
They stay in their own lane.
So I had to get a cider maker from Norway, actually, to come and say, I'm only going to do this if you use wild yeast. And once the Norwegian cider maker said that, made it a demand, I was like, okay, sure, why not? And which is what they wanted to say all along.
Yeah, that's like some people need to hear it from the doctor.
Yeah, and if they did it, and now it's a part of their program now.
Fantastic.
So a lot of what I do is having to just accelerate what will eventually happen in 10 years. So I just have to. So that's what I do. I just am very an accelerator
You
facilitator.
got to have a lot of patience, huh?
Yeah, I don't think that I'm a very patient person, but
No, you are. You're still in the game.
yeah,
So you might have some patience there that you don't realize. You're going from a very deep well. You know, we're post-pandemic, and we're still navigating. We all have PTSD from that. Businesses are still recovering. You've created this new venture that for judging, which is in many ways like a hell of a lot of work.
yeah, not easy because we
Not
don't
easy.
have
The education, because you got to get people to sign up for that. You're doing it over not just one day, but of course, there's a reason why people do it in one day.
So I didn't answer your question earlier, but our tasting period is over the scope of 3 months.
3 months. Oh my gosh!
And
Wow.
we don't have a one day, we don't have one location. I'm literally hauling ciders everywhere.
Wow.
Anywhere
You're
that they'll
working
have
double
me.
time.
So yeah, it's a lot of work. It is, and it's obviously not sustainable, and I can't keep doing it. So the battle is how long can I do it before it catches on, or how long is it before I can teach other people how to do this?
So let's go back to 2020, because at that point there was momentum. So is there a way you're looking for a way to reignite that momentum, right?
Yeah, and so here we are at 2023 and 2024.
Right, 2024.
And so what we have now is this fantastic upswell of interest in making cider. There's more cider being produced in Japan now than ever.
Commercially, or are you talking about amateur?
Commercially, because there is no amateur cider. You cannot make alcohol in Japan.
Oh, legally you
legally.
can't.
So home brewing is not allowed. And this is a big problem, because one of the best ways for people to learn how to...
Oh, absolutely. We
is
have
to
the same
homebrew.
problem with distilling here. People don't get to...
Yeah. So it's absolutely illegal.
My goodness.
So what's happening now is a lot of OEM ciders are being produced. So restaurants now that want to have cider on their menu will just make their own instead of buying it from...
And is the requirements to be able to make it commercially difficult to jump through the hoop there, or if a restaurant says I want to make my own cider, it's not
If they
easy.
want to, they have to, basically they hire licensed cider
Okay.
maker. To probably easier to make commercial cider in Japan than it is in other countries.
Yeah.
But it does come with a cost, because the legalities about making alcohol are quite strict. So you can get the license, but once you get the license, you have to abide by these rules. There isn't just one licensor. There's quite a lot of different licenses, and this is a good and bad thing. And it's just another layer of challenge that I don't even know if we've got time. That would be a whole other podcast. But we do have momentum. There are more people wanting to make cider, get into it, see
Great.
what it can happen.
Great.
However, like the rest of the world, economics is now playing a pretty critical...
It's a little deep pockets to be able to jump in and start making cider commercially.
Yeah, and what has happened in Japan for the last year and a half is we've have a bizarre inflation problem happening. And it's bizarre because Japan really hasn't experienced this kind of across-the-board inflation in 50 years. Consumers in their 20s, for example, have no idea what inflation is and are freaking out. Why are prices going up? Prices that have not changed
In many years.
in 30, 40 years. And in Japan, again, it's everything is on a national scope. So if you buy drink A at location A in city A, you can buy the same drink in any other location in Japan for the same exact price.
It doesn't change.
There's no
Yeah.
competing, there's no price competition is not a thing in Japan. But when everybody suddenly has to
Raise the price.
40%, and these are not small increases, these are
40% is pretty high.
the postage stamp they've just popped it, I think it was like, it's nearly double what it was the first time ever. These things just don't happen, and people, because they're not used to it, they don't know what to do. So the initial reaction is, we'll just stop buying everything because we're just going to wait and see what happens, which obviously exacerbates the problem, blah, 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 blah.
Absolutely.
It's everybody, but cider in particular. So now you've got these people that were gung-ho about it, have just spent their life savings or they've gotten a business loan to get into the business, and now they're not making any money. So now what kind of signals does that send to everybody? So everyone's panicking right now. And it's maybe not, panicking might be a bit of a strong verb to use, but people are, it's slowing down is definitely happening, and second looking and second guessing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so what do I have to do is, again, keep that ball rolling, smile, and
Keep on forging on. So this leads me to another piece on this, which is how do you take care of yourself? Because what these problems that you're talking about are very similar to what we see in many places. And I know myself, Cider Chat chose from the beginning to be on the upswing with the Motto Cider going up. And luckily for me, my constitution is such that my pendulum always swings towards happiness, even when I probably should be sitting on the side of the road in a corner, curled up crying. I'm not one to stay in that place. I just can't. My constitution says otherwise. What do you do for yourself there?
wow,
That's a heavy one.
That's a heavy one because
Yeah, you need a
it's
minute?
not been.
Should we open the cider and talk about it?
cider? What's the percentage on that? I don't think it's going to do a trick. Might have to get a few bottles of whiskey going, but.
We don't even have an AB. We got a cider here right in front of us.
My guess would be somewhere, it'd be 5%, 5.5%. It's the standard. Yeah, last year was not easy. I'll be just perfectly frank. And I'm not afraid or ashamed to say that on the business financial side, yeah, we took a massive hit. Mm-hmm. That, and it wasn't just a single hit. We were like getting hit from all sides. And yeah, there was a point where I thought, what have I done? Yeah, what have I done? This is not going to last. And yeah.
How do you take care of yourself, buddy?
So
how do you stay so positive in this market?
Yeah, it's
I'm feeling
crazy.
a little sad here. I'm like,
it's crazy
because we don't want to lose Lee Reeve, who's one of my heroes in the cider.
So a lot of what any person who does involved in promotion is social media, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to get the pictures out there, and you've got to get the message out there. But I withdrew. I actually stopped. I was doing like a post a day, and I didn't have the energy to do it, and I withdrew. And then social media, if you withdraw, there's so much other stuff going on that people don't see that you've withdrawn. It's like nobody cares. And then I went through that phase, like all this work that I've been doing and nobody even cared. And then self-pity and self-doubt and self-hate, all these like horrible things. Yeah, so I've been there, just coming out of it actually. But I do have mentors, very close friends that have been, importers that have been doing it for 15, 20 years, that kind of thing. And they're just, mate, what you're doing is only you can do.
Yeah,
and
it's true.
To hear...
That's a spark.
It's a spark, yeah.
Good.
And
you need a spark. You just need to keep on finding those sparks.
I think I probably created a new job. What do they call it? Creative financing. How do you pay the electric bill? And so, so I've gone through all that.
Yeah.
And not unscathed. And I mean that, but I think I zenned out and said I need to find some peace and quiet. Got that peace and quiet, and then heard the same message that I heard when this all got started was, this is what you do. This is what you do. And if you're going to do something, you better be able to do it till the bitter end. And how do you want to go out doing what you love to do? So I'm prepared for that. Yeah, it is what I'm passionate about. It just is. The good news is, though, is that 2024 does look like things are getting better. And not just for myself, but for...
A little bit more broader.
Yeah, there's still a lot of hurt going around, and we still feel a lot of the squeeze, but really look at it, because I'm constantly looking at the bigger picture. It's like, all right, you just need to get through this amount of time, and things should be they'll be definitely better than they were last year, and then that gets you to the next step. And so I'm still very positive about the future. Again, not just Japan, but everybody, because everybody is struggling.
I'm glad we came back to that place again.
Oh yeah, I know. I wouldn't have come here if this were going to be, that kind of conversation. But I think it's important. I think you have to be able to go there. Because
absolutely.
The thing that really...
And we've had these kind of conversations, you and I, over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm going to just say, commiserate a little bit about the state and support of media that's trying to promote cider.
Oh, absolutely.
You got to spend money to make money. It's like the way it goes on all those different parties. And when you're the person working in media, like yourself, like myself, and a handful of people, let's be frank, a handful of people in the world doing that, you don't want to lose that. And if you're not keeping up your website, or you have a website that doesn't really actually give information about you, and the audience now wants to know the story, that's why we're having this conversation, so people know who Lee is.
But it's a great lesson that you're giving right now to anybody, but I'm thinking right now particularly to producers that, it's promoting isn't simply about getting on a platform and posting a lot of pictures, hoping that you'll generate an audience. It doesn't work that way. Maybe for a 0.01, but that lucky person. But I think in order to succeed in any sort of business, but particularly in a niche, with a niche product like cider, is really understand. One is, why are you doing what you're doing? I mean, if you're doing it for yourself, brilliant. But now you need to sell that product somewhere. And I really identifying what your market is. What I do is I look at other, what I consider success stories of people that have been in the game and continue to be in the game, and then find out from them what works. And what I've gathered from the amount of research that I've done for myself is that the ones who do well are the ones that have partnerships. And what I mean by partnerships is they work with more than one
branch on the tree
to make money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, and we've all gone through it with the pandemic, it's completely unpredictable and can happen anytime when a revenue stream completely dries up, gets shut down, and then you don't know how long that revenue stream is gone. If you're only relying on one or two streams, you're screwed. Many of my friends did go under. The ones who didn't were the ones that were able to either pivot to another stream or be flexible enough to create one. But
do you have other revenue streams?
Now I do.
Yeah.
Now I do, but I nearly lost it all. Really, my personal mistake was when I became an importer. The amount of time and energy it takes to learn that skill and then implement it and execute it took so much of my focus, time, and energy, money, that I wasn't watching the other aspects of the business. And when the yen tanked and things got expensive, and then suddenly my costs were
through the roof,
and I couldn't pass them on to my customers. I was, what we're going to do. I am very fortunate that I was able to see that mistake before it cost me dearly. And now, and again, I think one of the reasons why I talk about 2024 being a lot sunnier is the fact that, I'm now developing different, I don't want to keep using the word revenue, but we're not reliant on
that's the factor of the
aim factor, right? We do many things, but they all work together. They all interact with each other.
Same thing.
So I think if you can do that, you'll have a stronger, more stable business.
Lee, and I think I'm going to take the liberty of speaking for all of Ciderville. Really appreciate what you do, and do not want to lose you in this journey. And I do want to say that Lee arrived here for this interview today after experiencing a fall on the ice outside here at in Portland and slipping and sliding, and that kind of just shakes the core of your body. Thank you for showing up and that you're in one piece. And should we talk just a little bit about this?
Why not? I would love to. So I brought you this bottle of, it's not a new cider, it's actually a revamped cider. This is from an outfit called OK Adam in the north of Japan. And I love it because one, it's owned and run by two ladies. And
have they been to CiderCon before?
Yes. So
I know them.
Mami and Abe-san.
Yeah.
And they came and they had done not a tour, what's the word? Some training maybe is a better word, but they had done a sort of a
Oh, up in maybe with Christine.
That's right,
Yes,
at Bauman
Walters,
Cider.
Yeah, Bauman, yeah.
So they hung around her outfit and watched.
It's so much fun.
They have since done a collaboration with her, which I imported, which was
Good.
so much fun to do. And they just got their license. So now they're officially a cidery. And so this is the cidery produced cider versus the one that you probably might have had a taste of, which was they made it somewhere else.
Okay.
So this is their own, and it's their flagship.
Very exciting.
But-
yeah. And it has hops. It's called Hop In.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's
what kind of hops do we know?
no, I
this
don't. But
is-
I'm guessing I'm gonna say it's got to be one of the C's. It's probably
Like
Citra,
yeah,
maybe
okay,
Cascades.
all right.
But this is for the cider purists, they might go, what? But in Japan, this is currently, again, we talked about this earlier, the laws regulating what you can do and can't do. There's a kind of license that allows you to, or that requires you, that you've got to put in malt.
Oh.
So there's
interesting.
probably a
Damn.
itty bitty tiny bit of malt.
Damn, you have to put in malt because you're doing
The license,
Wow.
or in
The license because you're making a cider with
yeah. So there's
a
basically,
botanical,
let's see,
basically?
yeah. There's
Wait.
there's many more. There's two basic kinds of licenses. One's a wine license,
Yeah.
where you ferment a juice. Those are very expensive, and if you have to make a whole lot of it in a year, or you don't get the license renewed. There's another kind of license which is a lot more affordable, and the requirements for yearly production are much more
Lower,
reasonable.
okay.
But that license requires there must be malt. Again, another layer of challenge about cider in Japan. Is it a cider? Is it Graf?
Yeah.
Is it we're going through those growing pains? But so it's a very popular thing right now in Japan. A lot of people, and also too because the profile of the apples, right? You've got mostly table apples with a lot of sugar in them.
Right.
They ferment dry, not a lot of body. So hops will spice it up a little bit. And but there's the many other ciders I've that have no hops, that have no malt, that are actually real ciders that we call them. But this is just one. But I love it because this is a great story because, again, when they got started, had a lot of problems, and now they've got a cidery. And
Fantastic. I know
they're
that
doing
they
their
were
thing.
really working on it when I met them. It's just lovely. So
Yeah.
again, thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, a
This is-
pleasure to be on again. I love what you do. I think Cider Chat is just an indispensable tool for everyone. I'm talking to you about what has happened since. But if you look back at Cider Chat, number one, this is the history of cider. So it's an honour to be a part of it, part of this history.
Find links to Insider Japan and the Japan Cider Cup at ciderchat.com, episode 406 with Lee Reeve. And while you're out there on the internet checking out Cider Chat, don't forget about the French Cider Tour rolling out in September of 2024. And if this podcast is worth your time, please do hit the donate button or become a patron of Cider Chat at the Cider Chat Patreon page. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like palms, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like palms, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason.
There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there
There
is.
is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes, there
There
is.
is a reason why we drink it like this.
Oh yes, there
There
is.
is a reason. We We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh, yeah.
We like cider.
Oh, yes, we do.
We like palms.
Oh, yes, we do.
We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There's a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh, yeah.
We like cider.
Ba-da-da-dum.
We like palms.
Oh, yes, we do.
We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!